Smith, and welcome to your news at noon. These are the top stories we're tracking. PPPC destroys Patterson's motion on special land policy for shore bases. 27 questions sent to the leaders for their answers. Rodney's death to be officially recognized as assassination, says Attorney General. Meanwhile, Uri's agents and marketers slapped with money laundering charges. Government braces for more heavy rainfall, says PM Phillips. Meanwhile, teen arrested for stealing money from Region 9 RDC. And distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, Health Minister tells House at least 16.8% of adult population fully immunized. Meanwhile, taxi driver charged and released on $150,000 bail for raping teen, and Pomeroon flood-affected residents being evacuated to temporary shelters. And 6 months in, Linden MTC yet to receive 2021 subvention. Stay tuned to stay informed. Tabled by Shadow Minister of Petroleum Sector David Patterson for there to be a special land policy in place for shore bases was defeated last night by the PPPC. This was after more than 7 hours of consideration. The motion that was tabled in March proposed that a multi-agency task force be formed to examine a land use policy for the oil sector and mandate that all future shore bases be state-owned but leased to private operators. Patterson brought the motion on the premise that there is an enormous and growing need for shore bases to service the needs of the local industry. The former minister's motion also highlighted the fact that the Guyana Shore Base Incorporated, located at Plantain A, Houston, Greater Georgetown, does not have the capacity to handle Guyana's shore base needs and certainly will not be able to handle the growing needs on its own. In other news, Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs Mohabir Anil Nandlal announced yesterday that Dr. Walter Rodney's death would be officially recognized as an assassination. Nandlal told the members of the House yesterday that Rodney's wife and children requested of the President and his government to set the record straight surrounding his death and to formally honor the life and legacy. Nandlal continued that Ali and his government have acceded to the request and labeled the move as part of a historic step of bringing some level of closure to the Rodney family. Dr. Rodney was the founder and a former leader of a political party called the Working People Alliance. He was killed at age 38 after a bomb exploded in his car on June 13, 1980 at John Street, Working Rust, between Hadfield and the Bent Streets, less than 100 meters from the Camp Street prison. His brother, Donald Rodney, was in the car with him during the time of the explosion and was injured. And moving on, 2 agents or marketers for alleged Ponzi scheme operator Yuri Garcia Dominguez have been slapped with money laundering charges and yesterday made their first appearance in 2 courts on the east coast of Demerara for the offense. Aubrey Norton and Martina C. Prasad were slapped with 2 charges under the Anti-Money Laundering, Counter and Financing of Terrorism Act. They were charged by SOCU, an arm of the Guyana Police Force. According to information, the duo lived with Garcia Dominguez and his wife, Atika Ishmael, who were accused of bilking thousands of Guyanese of over $4 billion. Garcia Dominguez and his wife are officials of Accelerated Capital Firm, Inc., through which they allegedly solicited millions of dollars from Guyanese. And now let's tell you the government of Guyana is bracing for more heavy rainfall in the coming weeks, with showers expected to continue throughout August. So said Prime Minister Mark Phillips at the National Assembly yesterday. He was at the time giving an update to the House on the recent rainfall, which resulted in flooding in several regions in the country. The Prime Minister also spoke extensively on the government's response to some 29,000 households in the flood-affected areas. According to Phillips, the government, led by President Irfaan Ali, has mobilized support and venture into regions where they helped distribute food and basic cleaning supplies to the residents. He noted as well that the rainfall in May alone was recorded as the second highest rainfall across the country in the last 40 years. And moving on, a teenage district development officer for Region 9 RDC is now in police custody after embezzling a sum of $867,144 from the council. According to a police report, 18-year-old Ishmael Marcelo was handed a sum of $8.2 million along with relevant pay sheets for May 2021 salaries, which was intended to pay government employees within Aishalton District in Region 9. On June 2nd, the employees within Aishalton District started to complain about not receiving their salaries. An internal investigation was then conducted, and it was revealed that a total of $867,144 could not be accounted for. Marcelo subsequently fled Aishalton, and a report was made to the police on Tuesday. He was found by police, arrested, and placed into custody. Statements are currently being taken, and an investigation is ongoing. You are tuned into Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and of course 99.5 FM. This is your news at noon. We will return after the break. Frank Anthony told the National Assembly yesterday that Guyana's efforts to immunize its population are underway, with at least 16.8% of the adult population being immunized. Dr. Anthony was at the time presenting an update on the countrywide immunization efforts against the deadly COVID-19 virus at the beginning of the 20th sitting of the 12th Parliament. The minister said, and I quote, "As of yesterday, we were able to give out 297,490 doses of the first dose of COVID-19 vaccines. 81,761 of those have been fully immunized, which is equivalent to about 16.8% of the adult population being fully vaccinated." During his remarks, Dr. Anthony also lauded the health workers for their diligence in ensuring that the population is vaccinated. He noted, however, that Guyana cannot successfully exit the pandemic until every eligible person is immunized. And now let's tell you the taxi driver who is accused of taking a teenage girl to a location that she did not request and allegedly raping her was yesterday charged and released on $150,000 bail. The defendant, Hector Johnny of Bartica, made his first appearance in the Bartica Magistrates Court before Magistrate Crystal Lambert, where the charge was read to him. Johnny was not required to plead to the charge, which alleges that on May 11th, he raped a child under the age of 16. Magistrate Lambert then placed him on bail and adjourned the matter to June 23rd. In other news, in light of the recent flooding in the Pomeroon, the Civil Defense Commission and the Region 2 RDC Democratic Council are partnering in evacuating residents to establish shelters. According to the CDC, 2 temporary shelters have been established in Karawab and St. Monica within the Lower Pomeroon. Reports indicate that 10 families have already been evacuated to a shelter in Karawab called Longhouse. It is understood that the building has a capacity to facilitate 16 families. In addition to Longhouse, Karawab Community Center can also facilitate a number of families. Also, there are some 160 households within Karawab, 55 of which are still affected by floodwater. While some residents have migrated from the area to relatives in other regions, some have taken up residency at the shelters. And moving on. With almost half of 2021 being completed, the Linden Mayor and Town Council is yet to receive the subvention budgeted for since December 2020 for the completion of capital projects within the township during the 2021 budgetary year. Linden Mayor Winika Arindel bemoans the holding back of funds at a time that is very critical to the council. The sum of $18 million was allocated to the council by central government, but that money has not been released. The mayor claims that the decision to hold back the funds is because the council refused to be bullied into what to spend it on. Decisions on capital projects are done following consultations with the various constituencies, and the residents decide what is deemed a priority. And now for your COVID-19 update, 2 men who tested positive for the novel coronavirus have died. According to the Ministry of Health, the latest fatalities are that of a 58-year-old and a 42-year-old, both from Region 4. Their deaths now move the country's COVID-19 death toll to 419. 149 new COVID-19 cases were recorded, taking the total number of confirmed cases to 18,088. A breakdown of the new cases per region shows that Region 4 leads with 44 new cases, Region 9 with 37, Regions 3 and 6 with 26 each, Region 5 and 8 with 8, and Region 10 with 6, and Regions 1 and 7 with 1 each. The COVID-19 dashboard also shows that 20 patients are in the COVID-19 ICU, 101 persons are in institutional isolation, 1,506 in home isolation, and 1 person is quarantined institutionally. To date, a total of 16,042 recoveries have been recorded. And on that note, we bring you a special list of questions, just a few questions from the publisher of the Kaieteur News. Glenn Lal, publisher of the Kaieteur News, invites the leaders of the society to give in-person responses to a series of questions that he has thought of, and the answers to which would be of great interest to all Guyanese citizens. If any of you cannot attend, the answers to the questions below can be presented in writing, which he commits to delivering untouched to the Guyanese public via Kaieteur Radio and Kaieteur News. The invitation is for his Kaieteur Radio program this Friday, June 11th at 19:20. The questions are: why don't we have a ring fencing provision in the Exxon contract to protect us? Why do we have to give Exxon and its partners 1 month's notice before we can go to check or audit their books when we have a 50-50 partnership? Why are we paying ExxonMobil's taxes for them, their contractors and subcontractors? Why do we allow the oil players to dump produced waters into our oceans? Why are we allowing flaring during full oil production? Now that's just a small list of questions from the actual 27 questions that the publisher of the Kaieteur News has given. And now we head over to the page 7 of the Kaieteur News dedicated to being blunt. Dr. Richard Van West Charles, when exposed by Kaieteur News reports for extravagant spending at the GWI during his tenure as CEO, said something strange. As carried in the Kaieteur News on June 9th, the former GWI CEO said, and I quote, "I cannot deny double charging happened, but I had nothing to do with it." Dr. Van West Charles is part of Ghana's political royalty and should know that the cop-out is not acceptable and falls flat. What applies to the ordinary business executive also applies to him. He was the CEO, he was in charge, and therefore he is responsible whether he had nothing to do with it or not. He ought to have known, had systems in place, and the right people to oversee how the financial assets of GWI were being used. He is not off the hook, and negligence could be laid at his feet. He should have known and taken action. This must be the standard for all CEOs. And with that, we've come to the end of today's News at Noon. I'm Kevin Smith. Thank you for listening. And that's the news of the moment. Remember to get the full details